This may not even work. Hi, my name is Abby. I'm a curly-haired keeper, and today we are building Stella a ginormous toad ranch enclosure. The plan for this build is to move Stella from her current 8 feet long by 2 feet deep by 2 feet high, more minimalistic enclosure into a much larger 12 feet long by 30-inch deep by 4 feet high enclosure, complete with custom shelving, a few live plants, and to make it fully bioactive, much like all of my other retic enclosures, just on a much larger scale. We'll also be building custom pallet stands so we can modify the bottom of the enclosure to include a simple drainage system with a floor flange, a drainage tube, and a small rubber tub. Oh, and we'll also need to completely rearrange the existing enclosures to make room for this giant thing. My assignment for today is to move this hunk and stack, that hunk and nope, wrong one, and that hunk and stack down to the basement. All right, editing magic from the garage to ta-da! These are all down in the basement. They're gonna live down here until they're ready to be assembled. But first, we need to cut wood for the drainage stand that we are going to make. So let's get that done. For the pallet stands, we did a quick Lowe's run to get a couple of plywood boards and several 4x4s that we then cut to make 2 6-foot by 30-inch stands. Here's some dramatic saw cutting footage for you, when in reality it actually sounded like... Anywho, now that all the pieces are cut, time to spray paint them, but first an artistic interlude because content nobody asked for. You're welcome. Okay, now that the spray paint has been efficiently shaken by the beats of my own bootay, let's actually get some more work done and paint these bad boys. Okay, that's all done. That's done. That's done. I just gotta bring it back into the garage before I start training. Whew, so sweaty. I forgot to film hubby actually assembling the stands, but here's them completed. I'm just adding the protective feet here. Flipping them over, ensuring they align together, and then doing a fit test for one of the 2 rubber bowls I'll be using for drainage. Okay, we have some work to do. We need to rearrange this entire room to make space for the giant enclosure and decide where we want to put it. Either needs to go right here or over here. Yeah. Off we go. This was definitely a 2-person job. Luckily, most of the enclosures we needed to move were the smaller ones, so definitely doable with 2 people. However, when we got to the highest stack, we had to get a little creative in how we got Centauri's enclosure up there. But we got there eventually. And then celebrated accordingly. It's been one of those days where everything is taking like 10 times longer than you think it should take. Because of things like cords being on the wrong side of an enclosure when you move them.
And so now, we need to pretend to be the dentist of this tank.
We literally had to completely, not completely, but move some cords around on top of Aries' tank to make it butt up against that stack properly. So yeah, things like that.
Off we go.
Awesome. With all the cords aligned correctly, we were able to reinstall the top of Aries' enclosure and get things all put back together and where they needed to be for the evening. Alright, now that we've got the stands all done and the room rearranged, now we can start building the actual enclosure. First thing I always recommend to do before jumping in and building a toad ranch enclosure is thoroughly read the instructions. Okay, all of these are moved in here. I'm already sweating. The panels are movable if you're moving them by yourself. They're easier to move with two people, so if you do have an extra pair of hands, it does make it easier. The instructions are admittedly, for me, slightly confusing, but I am a tactile, like kinesthetic learner, not a visual learner, so yeah, I'm just gonna start kind of piecing it together. My goal is by the end of the day to have it mostly put together. I'm gonna wait to put on the facing panels and the tops because I still need to get some Arcadia lighting, and I want to get it all sealed before I put the top and the facings on it. I just think it's easier to seal enclosures, especially if you have quite a bit of sealing to do, which these ones will. And then we also need to do the modifications to the bottom, which will probably happen tomorrow morning. So let's get to putting these bad boys together. I don't know why I said that. I don't say bad boys. Now that I am properly equipped with pockets, let us commence with the building. All right, I got the first side done. I just need to do the same with the other side, and then we'll piece them together. Assembling it on the floor, by the way, is actually a pretty good trick if you're assembling it by yourself. Okay, I am very quickly running out of space in this room because this build is very large, but I did get I have to climb over that. Okay, I got both sides of this built, and this is why they're able to ship the giant enclosures, is because they have them broken up into two separate sections, and then they seam together in the middle. So that's the next step. I'm going to seam these together, and these just kind of line up, and you screw these seams together and then put the facings on, because I think those are the last bits where I have to screw anything into the bottom panels. So this is the bottom, that's the back, and then the right side and the left side. And then I can stand the whole massive thing up and put them back on their stands, and then put the shelves on. I'll put the shelves on before I put them on the stands, because otherwise I won't be able to get to the back panels. So yeah, so far so good. All right, so learn from my mistakes. I bolted the center support too soon. I unbolted it. I need to separate them and then put the facings on, because each facing screws into the center support individually, because there's a facing for this side and a facing for that side. So yeah, and Jody is playing the maracas with the bolts because he is a serial fidgeter. I fixed it. That's all together. It is upright. It is huge. It looks amazing. Next up is one of my favorite add-ons, and that, as you all know, is the shelves. For these particular shelves, I do find it easier to install them if you partially screw in all of the screws first from the back. I don't know why, but this is reminding me of that shootout scene from Dick Tracy. A second pair of hands is 100% required for installing shelves on an enclosure of this size. So I recruited the hubby and we installed the shelves. Shai decided to come out and be our little helper for installing the shelves. Something else I always do for my bioactive enclosures is install some type of circulation system. So here you'll see me installing 2 electronics fans. They're both facing opposite directions on either side of the enclosure to create some cross breeze. Hey, this dude looks familiar. Garrett came over for dinner and very graciously helped us get this thing up onto its stand after I had it built. It took a little finagling and making sure toes didn't get smushed, but we got it up there. Alright, next up is installing the drainage to each side. So we are going to put a drain here-ishly and a drain here-ishly. Here-ishly? Here-ish. Here-ish-ly. Alright. Things you need to make a drain. A marker of some kind to mark where you want it. This fancy little drill bit. A hole saw is super helpful. And of course, a drill. You will also need some kind of tubing, along with a catch pan of some kind. This is a little 4-inch rubber pan that I got from Tractor Supply. The first step is to make a shallow hole that the flange can sit in. And then you use a hole saw the same diameter as the tubing you want and drill all the way through the bottom of the enclosure as well as the pallet stand. We did modify the floor flange just a little bit by sawing off the piece that we didn't need. Super easy, super quick. And the final step is to fit the flange through the hole and feed the tubing through, connect them, and cut off whatever bit of tubing you don't need. Super simple, but highly effective. All right, now that that is done, the next step is to silicone and seal this entire thing. Okay, now that I am slightly high from that, I have the windows open, but whew, the sealant stuff smells so bad. It's 100% silicone. It just But I'm going to let this sit overnight, 24 hours, and let it seal completely, which is great because I'm still waiting for cool things to be delivered before I move on to the next step. We happen to live in a really rural area, so I wanted to do a little bit of scavenging for some sticks and leaf litter and general stuff that I could add to Stella's enclosure. It might have just been an excuse to get outside and enjoy nature a bit. I did know of an old tree that actually fell over during a windstorm last season, so I pulled several large branches from that. I tend to like to get branches from trees that have already fallen and from our own property. The branches were a little thick, so I recruited the husband with the chainsaw and the Jeep, and we loaded them up and headed back to the house. We have a very busy day today, lots of errands to be run. I am currently at Siobhan's nursery and I'm about to get all of the stuff that I need to build out her bioactive. Sturdy that roots really strong, and ficus tends to do that. Decisions. Have I potentially overdone it? Debatable. If I get pulled over on the way home, it's going to be a hilarious conversation. I am back. And I'm unsure how I got all of the things into my car, but here we are. Quick haul of what I picked up today. So this is the brand of kind of base substrate that I use in my bioactives. This is for all of my bioactives. The brand is Fox Farm. The fertilizer, well, it's the fertilizer company. It does not contain any inorganic fertilizers. It's all safe for isopods and reptiles. And then I use fancy hardwood mulch. It's undyed and also safe for reptiles. So hardwood just simply means it's like ash and hardwood trees that the mulch is derived from. And if you are going to use a hardwood mulch, just make sure you purchase undyed mulch. And of course we have sphagnum moss. We have some screen mesh for the substrate barrier. These are all the heat panels and thermostats from Reptile Basics. And then what else do we have? We have a bunch of Leca. This is all about a third of what I got. By the way, it's not all in here. A bunch of charcoal for making isopods and springtails happy, and just to help aerate the soil a little bit better and filter out the soil, and then a bunch of plants. So I'm going to work on getting this all together, rinsing out all of the Leca, cutting out the substrate barrier, and hopefully I can get this all put together tonight. For the bioactive layer, I started by adding a good amount of Leca. The drainage layer is now complete. It's a depth that I'm happy with. So now we are going to carry on and add the substrate layer and mix together all of the substrate. So let's go. I followed that up with some substrate barrier. This is just synthetic screen netting that I picked up from Lowe's. That was like a game of high-stakes fitted bed sheets. Now that that is done, moving on to adding the substrate. So the ratio mix that I use is roughly 1-to-1 ratio of potting soil, mulch, and sand. And then I add in kind of the amount of sphagnum moss that I want as far as retaining moisture to get the humidity levels that I want. So I'm going to play around with that, add a little bit. Way easier to add than take away, so I'll add a little bit now, add more later if I need to, and go from there. So let's mix this all up. Adding in the aforementioned substrate mix, the last thing to do is mix it all together. That took about 75 years, but it's done now. Now we can mix it all up. The plants that I got for Stella's enclosure were 2 rubber trees, a ruby ficus, and 2 ZZ plants. All of these plants had a very well-established root structure, and that combined with the deeper substrate level of this enclosure will hopefully help in keeping them upright and alive if Stella decides to explore them a little bit. The nursery also had these really awesome larger bamboo poles, so I got a couple of them and put those in her enclosure as well. In my experience, the more climbing opportunities you offer your snake, the less chance they will climb on the plant. All right, I got a little bit more work done on the tops. These are the tops of the enclosure. I got the heat panels and the LEDs installed. I did save a little bit of space. I will be installing LED lights. I'm just waiting for VivTech to get the LED light that I want back in, not LED, sorry, UVB light back in stock. So those will go kind of here-ishly, but yeah, this is the layout for each side. It's a big enclosure, so I do have 2 120 watt, I think, radiant heat panels from, what brand? Bavarian Electronics. Installed on each side to ensure that I can adjust the heat how I want it to be, and then 2 of the longest LED bars. For lighting, I use LED that helps with the plant growth, and then I will install the VivTech UVB lights. These are flip-flop, by the way, just, you know, to make my life that much harder. So this top will flip that way and go on that side, and this top will flip that way and go on this side. Oh, the other thing, highly recommend when you're doing your lighting, tacking down your cords so they don't get unplugged by curious snakes, because they will. Installing the tops of these enclosures is a little easier done with 2 people, but as you can see, you can do it with 1 person. Getting both the tops installed, I then moved on to getting the thermostats all set. Let there be light. I then added a little bit of charcoal to keep the springtails nice and happy and add a little bit of filtration to the soil. Topped the soil with some leaf litter for the cleanup crew. Added the glass. I then added some final touches. Including Stella's favorite tub, and her favorite piece of cork bark from her old enclosure. Some springtails. And of course the isopod crew. These cute little guys are dairy cows. Stella moves in today. You want to put her in that side?
Well, honestly, whatever. Whatever works for you. Which one would you like?
She's a big girl. All right. You ready? Come here. You want to check out your new house? I want to check out the top of my new house. Here. Oh. Check it.
Across it.
Final thoughts on Stella's build. It is a lot. It's a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of investment to build an enclosure like this. It doesn't have to be this extensive, but either way you look at it, doing a bioactive enclosure of this size takes a lot. It is not everyone's style of keeping, and I completely understand that, and certainly do not expect everyone to keep this way and understand other styles of keeping. I myself have a couple of snakes still on paper, so please understand that I acknowledge and recognize that this is not everyone's cup of tea. This style of keeping happens to be my comfort zone. I prefer keeping bioactive. A lot of that is because it is the style of keeping that I am most comfortable with. It's how I prefer keeping, it's how I'm familiar with keeping. So as much of an effort and as much work goes into building out a bioactive like this, it's still my preferred method. It's not everyone's. I also understand that this may not work. The plants could get killed. The bioactive substrate may not acclimate how I want it to, so I will be keeping a really close eye and documenting anecdotally how this all goes and keeping everyone up to date. I do have a backup plan if this bioactive setup doesn't wind up working out how I want it to. So that's the other thing. If you have an idea of how you want to keep your animals, there's always a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. There's so many different ways to keep animals in a way that they thrive. And I think that's wonderful and just a nice perk to the industry in how keeping methods are being developed. So just something to keep in mind if you're diving into different ways of keeping. Now, this enclosure isn't completely done yet. I will add a few more things as time goes on. I want to get a couple more big pieces of cork bark and probably some more bigger branches for her to climb on. But other than that, I'm going to keep the plants a little bit more sparse just to see if they survive with her in there with them. But otherwise, it's done. I am so happy with how this build turned out. It's not very often that a build turns out the way that I really envision it, and this one is pretty spot on. And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end, that's amazing. I know this video is really long this week. Huge thank you and shout out to our Patreon fam. If you'd like to join us, it's $5 a month, patreon.com/thecurlyhairkeeper. And until next week, I will catch you later. So in the meantime, enjoy this aesthetic. Alright, things you need to make a drill. Nope. Things you need to make a drain. So we're at a little bit of a blah blah. In case you're wondering if Toad Ranch packs their enclosures well, yeah. Affirmative.